this is the third apprentice reunion that we've held here at the Island Sailing Club. We've had up to 115 on some of our events, and this year we've mustered about 105, which is quite a good cross-section. We've got all trades here. In fact, if we really had to, I'm sure we could design and build a ship between us.
Well, I'm Michael Moore, commonly known as Mick.
And I'm John Bradley, commonly known as Ben.
So you must have some stories to tell then. Tell me a story.
Tell you a story. Go on, Ben, you start. You start.
Well, the drawing office was quite ruled by a very formidable boss called Parker. And he was a pretty strict chap in every way. And as a 15-year-old apprentice, he was pretty daunting to work for.
I can remember one instance where our boss, Jimmy Parker, who, as we've said, was a pretty sort of, strict person, and he went on a week's holiday. And one of the members of the drawing office, Ken, what was his name? I can't remember his surname, but during this week, Ken decided he'd walk up to Cowes High Street and get a bit of shopping. And as he was walking up the high street, he bumped into Mr. Parker. And he said to Mr. Parker, "Oh, hello, Mr. Parker. Are you having a good holiday?" And he said, "Yes, I am. Are you?"
Well, I remember one of the things that we all were very conscious of was getting to work on time. When the whistle went, you hurried down there. If you were 2 or 3 minutes late, you lost quarter of an hour's pay. Also, the conditions we worked in those days, winter time, really was very cold and primitive. But if you see how ships are built today in segments and all under cover, it's a different scene altogether. The chain ferry used to work to the hours of the workmen here, and they were within minutes of the whistles blowing for either to go home or to join work. And together with Saunders Row, who also a lot of people cross the River Medina for work, it was really a minute by minute response to the workforce's needs.
I'm Bob Burton. I started working in Wight as a joiner apprentice at the age of 14, 1946, 7-year apprenticeship. Although the first 2 years you were basically on probation, your apprenticeship started at 16, which amounted to 5 years. But all that time, 7 years, you were learning all about the trade and social habits, if you like.
I started in 1954, and because I was only 15, I had to do a 6-year apprenticeship. I was in the A shop, which was the turning shop. You clocked in, and of course you've been there a year and you got a bit cocky, and a friend of mine who went to Australia, he was my best man. He used to come from another part of Cowes, both on our bikes, and we used to get to a certain road, and I used to look up there, there's Jim. So I clocked him in. Now one morning I thought it was Jim, so oh, there's Jim, so I clocked him in. After 8 o'clock, Frank Ball, who was a foreman in the A shop, come over to me. He said, "Oh, hello Westmore." He said, "Where's your mate, Jim Henson then?" I said, "He don't appear to be here, Mr. Ball." He said, "No," he said, "but he appears to be clocked in." I said, "Yeah, I clocked him in." He said, "Can you go home for the rest of the day on no pay?"
And you were serious, was you?
Yeah.
I compiled a book about my experiences, and in it I described it in 3 words: dirty, disgusting and dangerous. The conditions were pretty disgusting, but at the time we didn't feel they were that bad. That was the conditions that were prevalent at the time. Disgusting, I think, would apply to the toilet facilities, and dangerous because there wasn't the same emphasis on work and safety in those days that there is today. and serious accidents were quite a regular event, and even some fatalities.
Of course, as apprentice, you always got called on to do all the lumber work. When the timber lorries arrived and that, we were always sent down to unload the lorries, and very often fiberglass in them days. There was a lot of fiberglass and asbestos, and we used to unload the lorries of asbestos and fiberglass, not realising those days the danger of the materials. Never any face masks or anything like that, so there was dust floating around everywhere. And of course, as apprentices, young lads, we used to throw it at each other.
I think we were, how can I put it, unaware of the dangers that existed in those days. You know, health and safety was not known to that. There were rudimentary things of health and safety, and I think of all the asbestos type materials that we used, and the legacy from that is now being seen all over. I've worked with, I don't know, I would say acres of maronite, which was an asbestos based board for overheads, bulkheads, linings and so on. And unfortunately, a lot of those people which use that are no longer with us due to mesothelioma and asbestosis. And I think it's very relevant, that. And we were probably ignorant of what we were enduring.
And it does beg the question of why people that work with asbestos were paid such high wages.
Well,
I think the management knew the danger.
I think we got fourpens an hour over the raters, I think, in those days. That's how it was, and you accepted it. And I mean, I was there in the post-war years, and work was quite plentiful, but gradually it died off, and we saw what was a stable industry of cows completely disappear, and cows has never been the same since, in my estimation.
In the time that I was leaving Wight's, as an engineer, we were able to either go to sea for 3 years, or you had to do your national service. Now, that was in 1960 I left, and I left on 1960 in July. In 1960 November, national service finished, but I'd made all my arrangements, so I went to sea with the Orient Line, who were then taken over by P&O. When I came ashore in 1967, I joined Trinity House, and I was there with them 30 years, dry docking light vessels and Lambie buoys and the tender fleet.
I worked on a tug, a night tug, and I worked on it right from day one. And I did the model, and I did the shell expansion drawings, and I did a lot of the early drawings on it. And that, to me, was the best training anyone could get.
It was probably the best place to have an apprenticeship. We were all sent on day release to college, which was part of the 1944 Education Act. So we were pioneers, if you like. Yeah. And I have pleasant memories of the apprenticeship, and some hard ones as well.
From the day I started to the day I left, either in the drawing office or the mould loft at East Cowes, you could work as much overtime as you wanted. The yard was so busy during that period of time.
It was.
So we used to work all the hours we could.
Yeah. It was the best apprenticeship you could get anywhere in John Samuelworth. I think we'd all agree on that, wouldn't we?
It was, as everybody here said, like Ben, Mick and Bob, best apprenticeship you get. And I found that out finally when I went in the Merchant Navy. I got my call-up papers and I thought, I'm going into the army on 28 bob a week, which was in this money £1.40. And I wrote away to Royal Mail Lines, engineer officer at sea, £12 a week. So I went to Royal Mail in London, and I wrote a letter back, get up as soon as you can. Leadenhall Street. I think it was probably only the third time I'd ever been to London in my life. And I got outside the office in Leadenhall Street, because they were a big company, Royal Mail Line, and I knocked on the door. Come in. And he said, Mr. Westmore from the Isle of Wight. and I always remember his name, Joe Oliver, and he sat there rolling a cigarette with his feet on the desk. He said, right, he said, I've got 2 ships coming in from the Argentine that's going to need relief engineers. So he said, there's the Drina and the Desiado. Which one? I said, Mr. Oliver, I said, I've come for an interview. He said, I don't interview John Samuel Wight apprentices. You automatically got the job.
Really? Oh, amazing. That's good.
I always remember that. Yeah. And that sums up what we've all said.
Yeah.
Am I right, Bert? Bob?
Yeah, very true.
The thing that made White's, in my opinion, was the camaraderie. You had probably 1,200 men there at the time, both sides of the river, and if anyone had any misfortune, the hat would go around both sides of the river, and you probably never met the guy in your life, but his family would be looked after. But it was the men and the workers that, in my opinion, made the place.